Thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for coming. I think, there's a lot of weather going on. East Baton Rouge schools are canceled tomorrow, so I know we're right in the middle of this, but I really appreciate your time tonight. This is a picture that was taken in Houston just 2 days ago, and I think really speaks to what we're talking about, people walking through flooded streets. And this is actually very reminiscent of why I got into this field in the first place. It was in coastal Mississippi in 2005 after Hurricane Katrina. Many buildings were destroyed, mostly from the surge in Pass Christian. People lined up outside of a store waiting to get water, so a basic human necessity. Their houses were gone, everything was gone. At that time, I think we saw a lot more separation between the wind hazard community and any talk about flooding or storm surge. The researchers I was with are all considered wind engineers, and so they really looked at the wind damage. They said Katrina wasn't a real wind event. It's not very interesting damage, let's go home. And I said, well, what about all those people? With no homes, they don't really care that it wasn't interesting. They don't have a place to live. And so I feel that homes and where we live are one of the most important parts of infrastructure, because that's what allows us to live and work in our communities. And so as we think about the folks in Houston, saw some news right before I came over, about 30% of Harris County is underwater right now, and just the devastation that is occurring over there. To keep those folks in your thoughts, about the equivalent of 2 Lake Pontchartrains being dumped into Houston. So it's a lot of water. In a lot of ways, I'm not talking about that level of flood, but at the same time, I think some of the principles that I'm talking about tonight, apply to some of these catastrophic events as well. So if you learn anything from me, how to protect your home, there's only 2 things that you need to know. Avoid the flood. Build out of the flood zone. If water gets into your house, I think, we've all seen what happened last year in Baton Rouge. We've seen it over and over again. If the water gets in your house, it will take you at least 1 year until you're able to go out to the chimes again, right? Because you will be gutting your house, taking the mold out of your house, getting new furnishings for your house. So you want to avoid the flood, and that is all you need to know about flood design. And the second is to resist the wind. So we can't avoid the wind. Our houses are in the wind, but we need to design and build so that we can withstand those forces with all 4 walls intact. Building codes are one of our greatest allies, in my opinion. Building codes are designed in many ways from the onset to protect the safety and health of the occupants. And so that has gone from a life safety perspective, which is basically keeping the building from collapsing on you, to being something where you can live, operate a business, and really enhance the quality of your life. And when I'm talking about quality of life, this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about enjoying LSU football games, going out and having a good time, not spending weekends cleaning your house up after the flood. So this, to me, is the opposite of quality of life. The buildings are still there. Maybe this is considered a success by some. But anytime you have this type of thing happening over and over, that people it's happening over and over to, I believe that we're not building sufficiently. And so one thing to also remember is that building codes, by definition, are the lowest legal limit that you can build. So if you went to the doctor and he said, well, it doesn't look good, but I can do this, it's the least I can do, are you going to say, oh, that sounds great, sign me up? No, I wouldn't. So building codes, while they can really help, anything less than the code is not allowed. And so we see that all of this damage, all of this destruction is happening over and over again. That leads me to believe, my personal opinion, that the codes we have are not sufficient. So if you're building a house and you say, okay, well, it's to code, that must be good, I believe that's the opposite of true. it is the lowest level of home you can actually build. And one of the problems, I think, is our homes are not built by us, right? The developer that we're talking to or the builder we're talking to isn't saying, well, would you like to elevate your building? Would you like to increase the resilience? Would you like it so that you didn't have to worry about your windows being broken from storm events? The issue is that we go out, we look around the houses, we say, oh, I really like the paint in here, I really like the layout. That granite I think will look really good with my china. Let's get this house. And so that's how we make our decisions. We don't have a whole set of buildings that we're choosing from that are built better than code. And so we don't really have that option right now until something changes at that code level, or we decide to make personal changes ourselves when building a home or selecting homes. So just talking about flood hazards really briefly. If you build to the building code, and you would say that's a good building, you have a 25% chance of flooding within a 30-year mortgage. So that's an exact two-code building, your house will flood, 25% probability. So if your block has 4 people on it, one of you probabilistically would flood. And I don't think that's acceptable. If you went to go get cancer treatment and they said, well, there's a 25% chance that, such and such outcome would happen, you'll lose your leg, et cetera, you would think that's a bad outcome, right? And so I think the same is true for homes. And so in my opinion, we need to be looking beyond this 100-year flood standard. They call this the 1% annual flood now because it's confusing that the 100-year flood can happen 2 years in a row, which it totally can. Okay, so here we are. This is how we see floods, flood zones, flood requirements. And the building circled here in this picture is where we're at now, the Chimes and the Varsity. And as you can see, we're outside of the blue zone, which means we're completely safe. If the flood would come, we would survive. But these people over here, is that still a Mexican place? No, I haven't been over here for a while. They wouldn't be okay. And then they need flood insurance. They need to comply with all of these flood hazard requirements. So there's a lot of issues with this. There's a lot of issues of being in the zone versus out of the zone. If they would have extra requirements in the blue zone, maybe they would actually have to build higher than we have to build here, right? Because we are not in the flood zone, and that's kind of an issue that people have. Another problem with these types of flood maps is they're really expensive to create. You have to model the behavior of the whole watershed. You have to look at how the water is going to run off, to pool up, and as we pave more areas, as we put 5 guys in across the street, the behavior of the water is going to change. We're paving all of our pervious surfaces and making them impervious surfaces, so instead of the water having a little chance to go down into the ground, it's just running off. I know they've improved drainage a lot here, but we've still got these same issues with development, and the models aren't updated every 2 years, 4 years, 5 years. Maybe they're updated after a major event. These are done by the National Flood Insurance Program, and FEMA, the taxpayer, pays for this modeling, and it's really expensive and not done very often. So the basis behind the decision making, I think, is flawed. The concept that you're safe or not safe, or will flood, will not flood, is also flawed. Okay, so at the national level, people are wanting to change this. I'm actually part of the ASCE 24 National Engineering Standard Committee, and that looks at, we basically make a recommendation to the building code that says we want all of the homes elevated 1 foot. So this is in the 2015 International Residential Code. We think that this is important to help reduce some of these losses that we've talked about. It's not as comprehensive as we would like to get, but basically that's the standard that ASCE has put forth as a technical standard. It's incorporated by reference into this International Residential Code. At the state level, the Louisiana State Uniform Construction Code Council said, we don't need that. Jurisdictions should be able to make their own decisions, and people shouldn't be forced to elevate homes. it's expensive and they may not want to spend that money. So as I had said before, one of the issues with developers building our houses is that the developers don't care what your long-term outcomes are, right? They want to build a code-compliant house, they want to sell it, and then they want to move on and build more of them. I've talked to some parish officials and said, you know, what's your opinion on this? They say, well, we're not going to pass it on our folks in our communities. We don't want to tell them they need to pay more. So if the state tells us we need to pass it, then we'll do it. But until they do that, you know, we're not going to do it. So there's kind of a lack of political will, I think, in the state of Louisiana. There was an executive order by Governor Edwards that later came out and said, well, we're not going to adopt anything in the 2015 codes until we have a one-year moratorium. So with so many buildings damaged in the 2016 floods, they kind of put a stop to adopting the new building code. And so this concept, this topic is really on the table. So if you have a strong feeling about whether or not buildings should be more elevated versus where they are according to that map, contact your local building official, contact the Louisiana Code Council. That's what I'm doing. That's what many people are doing to try to get things changed here so that we could at least be at the new national standard. Right now, from what I understand, the Code Council wants to reduce the level of building in Louisiana lower than the new national standard. And I see that as a problem when we have millions of dollars of damage from flood events. Is it annually? Seems like it. Okay. So this is a picture from Dr. Craig Colton. I found it online. He didn't give it to me. But basically showing this building is totally intact. But would a foot have made a difference for these people? Would the outcomes have been different in terms of them spending the next year of their life cleaning out, gutting, rebuilding their home? How long did it take FEMA to be able to pay people to get back into their homes? So really our best bet is to stay out of the flood. Whatever you can do to do that, it's really worth it, because I like to spend my Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays goofing off. So my advice on how to protect your home, how to stay safe from floods is, one, live out of the 100-year floodplain. Obviously, you would have flood insurance if you were inside, but I don't really believe insurance compensates you for losing 1 year of your life, 1 year of your children's life, participating in sports, participating in activities, not living in your home because you're busy repairing your damaged building. Second, if you have a 500-year flood zone mapped, which many times you don't, but sometimes you do, live outside of that. So that's another layer you can look at as an additional layer of safety. So that means the 100-year, you have a 1% chance of that flood occurring every year. The 500-year, it's a 0.2% chance. So, you know, you've got 5 times more protection against that flood elevation. And I think that's you know, a good strategy. And third, if you have to live where it's going to flood, put flood resilient materials in your home. And so that would mean replacing your carpets with things like polished concrete, tile. Tile can have some issues, but replacing your bat insulation with closed foam cell insulation where you can, paper-faced drywall with non-paper-faced drywall. There's different techniques and strategies that you can use where you can you know, hose out most of that flood and then come back without having to gut out like we do with our typical construction. So for wind hazards, our whole thing with wind is you want to resist it. You will be in the wind, but you want the wind to go around your building rather than make cracks or in your building. We call that the building envelope. Once your building envelope is penetrated, you basically have this pressures building up on the inside, which want to cause your building to explode. So if you can see in this picture here, the wind is pushing on the windward wall, and then as it gets into those cracks, that pressure then acts out, and it's pulling from the outside and pushing from the inside, which doubles the loads on your buildings. So you want to keep your building intact and whole as much as possible. I've got a video here from IBHS, the Institute for Business and Home Safety, where they basically built 2 full-scale houses, one which is to code on the left side, and one that uses some better building practices on the right side. So these are typical building practices that they use, like for example in the state of Florida, and they're pretty easy. They're using hurricane clips instead of nails. For the roof-to-wall connection, I think Allison and I are battling here. Oh, okay, so the video's playing here. As the wind goes up, the roof flies off. We'll get to see that again. But basically, we don't get to see that front door opens in that building on the left, and as that pressure builds up, it gets into the house and then lifts the roof right off. It has no positive, well, very little positive connection, toenails at the top there instead of straps. You can see the shingles are coming off, and then we lose that whole connection there. So the practices in the building on the right are not, totally novel. They're just using better shingles for the roofs, better connections on that roof-to-wall connection where the roof came off there, using some tape on the joints. And we can see here, these are really your big money items in terms of improving your wind resistance for your building. So the flood, you're concentrated on the bottom part of the building. The wind, you're focused on the top part. But you can see that the age of the roof and also the rating of the roof, you can get some high wind rated shingles, and they perform much better than the standard asphalt shingles. So age of roof, how your roof deck is attached. It turns out you can just add more nails, and that makes a big difference. So if you space your nails every 6 inches instead of every foot, it makes a big difference in the improvement. There's a display from Law House outside, and we've got a handout there that kind of quantifies some of this. Allison said no graphs, so I have to have a handout. But here in Baton Rouge, we're between like the 120 and 130 mile per hour wind speed contour, and you can get maybe a 50% reduction in your wind loss by just putting a few more nails out there. So if when you're replacing your roof, you say, I want those nails every 6 inches instead of every 1 foot, I mean, maybe it will cost double on the nails and maybe double on the labor for your roof, but if you can reduce your losses significantly, might be a couple $100 investment up front, it really pays off. Secondary water resistance, and I'll come back to this. Shutters, so people, a lot of times shutters is the first thing people want to install. One of the things to think about is you really have to be in a high wind debris environment. A lot of places here in Baton Rouge, we don't get the wind speeds, so unless you've got a big wind environment, I would say that's probably the least bang for your buck. And then that roof-to-wall connection, which we saw that roof fail in the IBHS video. So I want to talk about the secondary water resistance, and this isn't a great picture here, but basically it's a tape that covers the plywood. So here's the plywood of the roof. Those are 4x8 sheets, and when you are re-roofing or you build a new house, put a new roof on, this is just tape, and they just tape where those pieces of plywood come together. And by taping that, then if you do have a failure of your shingle, then as the wind is, coming on, driving the rain onto your roof, instead of that rain coming down through your sheathing joints and then possibly saturating your attic insulation, which then is heavier on your ceiling drywall and then makes your ceiling collapse, and then get water all over your house, which is basically like a flood, so you want to avoid that. This just keeps all of that from happening. You would maybe have to come back and replace your shingles, but until you start peeling the pieces of sheathing off, you can keep your roof intact. And so one of the things that we're really interested in, and as I was talking about the building codes earlier, is what are changes in the building codes that we could make, or what economic justification can we give to the state to say, hey, let's change the building practices. It's for the betterment of the citizens, and it really doesn't cost that much. So we did a little study, and we used Homa as our case study. And so Homa is located down here. And that's right on the 150 mile per hour contour, which that is basically the design wind speed for wind events. This is the American Society of Civil Engineers hazard layer. So anytime a building is designed or built, this is the wind speed that it should be able to withstand without having any damage at all. So we looked at HOMA. And using HAZUS, which is a national loss estimation software. We didn't run the program itself because it can't actually do this calculation, but we took the loss functions out, we took the building inventory information out of it, and we found that there's about 7,500 homes in HOMA. And if we said the life of the roof is 30 years, and so every 30 years, all of the roofs would need to be replaced. And so let's replace them, a little bit at a time. We looked at modeling this over a period of 30 years. And so the present value, so brought back to today's dollars in savings just in HOMA alone from putting that tape on those joints is $32 million. The cost, present value cost, $6 million. So that means for every home in HOMA, to put this tape on would be a savings of $3,000. So the cost is about $1,200 for the tape and labor. So that's like me saying to you, if you pay $1,200 to put this tape on, I will give you $3,000 today. So that's the value in present dollars over time. So we're really hoping that results like this is just the first part of these types of results that we're producing. Although I was involved in some of the wind hazard reduction studies that we did after Hurricane Katrina, and we had taken those, distributed those to the state legislature, and that's the reason that we have a uniform building code in the state of Louisiana today. So you may or may not know, before Hurricane Katrina, we did not have a uniform code. The codes were piecemealed all across the state. So I really am hoping that by really working on a lot of these community level loss estimation numbers and methods, we can help get some of these building code changes passed so people don't have to individually educate themselves about these products and decisions. But there are a lot of different products that can be used. If you find yourself in a situation where you're making changes to your home, there's a lot of advanced technologies and products that are commonplace, like in places like Florida. If I have time for my story, I'll go ahead and tell it. Our garage door was broken. When we pushed the button, the arm was ripping the door apart. And so I said to my husband, we need a new garage door. I want an impact-resistant door because I think that would be better. My husband's a contractor. He works for a commercial company here in town. So he calls his buddy down at the overhead supply place, and he says, hey, my wife wants a wind-resistant door. And he said, well, if you tell me which model number, I can order it for you. It'll probably cost $1,000 in shipping, but I can get you anything you want, but you need to tell me what you want. And so, meanwhile, every time I push the button, it's ripping more and more apart. So we just got a regular door. And I tell that story because he's a contractor. This is what I do. And so if anybody could have gotten this new door that they wanted, it should have been us. So I'm not minimizing the difficulty of understanding the situation and making those types of decisions. And so that's really one of the reasons I'm approaching it from the building code perspective with the building officials. But at the same time, there are a lot of opportunities for homeowners to educate themselves and make better choices. One of the best resources I've seen, we're very lucky to have here on our campus, and that's the Law House, the Louisiana House. The Ag Center runs that over by the golf course. Dr. Claudette Reichel is the director. They have a great display outside. They have, not outside in the rain, that display is coming later, but just outside these doors, they actually have a mock-up of a roof, and so you can look at the different layers. You can see the tape that I'm talking about. It's not a really technical product, at all. But they have tours. It's a great place to take students. It's a great place to visit your family. And it's not just hazard resistant, it's also sustainable. And so if you're thinking about, I think they also have, aging in place features. It's just a really great resource that we have. So if you have not been to Law House, I really encourage you to go check that out. And so in closing, I just want to get us Louisianans out of these types of boat rides with the U.S. Coast Guard and back out on the river where we belong. So thank you very much for your time. I provided my contact information if anybody would like to get a hold of me later, but I believe we've got quite a lot of time for questions. Thank you.